everyone. This is Brian Whittington with the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. Today is a real treat. We have Mike Montague from Sandler Training. And the reason that Mike came to mind is back in my old life, participated with Mike Montague and another young lady, Lindsay Demetrius, Mike literally wrote the course on social selling. And now that you don't have an option and everyone is on LinkedIn, it's even more competitive than ever. I thought, hey, what a time to get Mike back on the show. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Brian, great to be here. Certainly.
Thanks for putting some time aside. So, as we dive into this, so I kind of tip my hat here. You helped write the course on this, and my sense is likely a lot's changed. But, why should people listen to you on social selling? There's a million gurus out there. Everyone is doing it. Why should we listen to you on this topic?
It's a great question, and I'll have maybe a three-part answer here for you. So the first one is most of the gurus and things that you will see out there, and this is the reason why I wrote the book in the first place 5 years ago, was everybody talking about social selling was saying, you build an audience, you join 50 groups, you get as many connections as you can, and then you engage the audience was the last line of their book. And I was like, well, that's great, but that's why I was reading the book. That's what I want to know is how do I engage them? I can't just send a post out there and hope somebody clicks on it and buys from me. And for salespeople, it's also really hard if you work at a company, let's say Uber or Salesforce, where they have thousands of salespeople. How are you all going to build massive audiences and followings at the same time, right? So I wanted to find tactics for individual sales rep performers that would actually be social selling, not social media marketing. And so the book we came up with was LinkedIn the Sandler Way. You can get it for free at sandler.com/LinkedIn Secrets. And then we ended up building a course from there. So that's evolved over the last 5 years. This year was also, again, really funny. You mentioned, Brian, as in March, everybody goes, oh my gosh, how do we sell over social media and the internet? And I was like, you mean the book and the course that we have? Yeah, right. That might be a good place to start. Yeah. So I know a lot of sales trainers and other people have jumped on it this year, but this is not a new topic for me or others. We've been doing this for quite a long time now.
Yeah, so I didn't realize that was 5 years ago. My goodness, it seems like yesterday. So
yeah.
5 years ago, you've been doing this. No, let's talk about the first thing you laid out there. What's the difference between social selling and social marketing?
Good. So the easiest way to think about it is marketing is sort of a branding opportunity. It's one to many, right? So we want to get as many followers as we can, build a nice big audience, and try to get as wide a reach as possible. In social selling, it's very much one-to-one conversations. It is, how do I start an interesting sales conversation with somebody that can add more people, opportunities, or information to my sales pipeline? So when I'm talking with salespeople, it's really those three things. We want more information about the opportunities we're already pursuing, more people in those accounts. We want more opportunities from the clients we already have. People, information, opportunities will help you build your pipeline so that you actually see more revenue.
Okay, so you said more info on accounts that we're selling into. So whether I'm using LinkedIn Navigator or I'm doing search on premium or just even the freemium version of LinkedIn, whenever I'm pursuing a particular logo, if you will, how do I find more people within that? So that's one. Number two is really, okay, we are now in a pursuit. Right? Maybe we didn't do that so we're in a pursuit. So what are the relationships that I need to know? What are all the stakeholders and how can I leverage them and get engaged with them? And then the third one, which I hadn't even considered, is, okay, we're in an account. How do we cross-sell, upsell, maintain, farm, and expand? So we've landed, now it's the expansion part. So those are the three things on social selling. And then the marketing side is more the brand recognition one-to-many. Is that a good summary of what you just said?
Yeah, I think so. And you brought me to one of my other favorite points. Every time I'm talking about this, people make the mistake of talking versus listening on social media. So the way I think about it is marketing is focused on what you're saying on social media. What am I posting? who's liking my stuff, who's commenting on my stuff. Selling is about listening. And there are, over 2 billion people now on social media begging for someone to pay attention to them. What if you're the person that's actually listening? What if you're the one that's liking and commenting instead of counting your likes? You're giving those to your customers, your prospects, your suspects. That changes the game. That's a sales conversation. That's a way that you can get the attention of your buyers, is by listening to them on social media, and everybody's talking. So everybody has information for you.
All right, so let's go down that little path there. Okay, so I can just hear it now. All my sales managers, VPs of sales, what? We're in the game of selling, and you're telling me selling is listening, right? We need to hit, in my Sandler vernacular, we need to hit cookbook, we need to hit numbers. How do we listen, yet hit these numbers? And I'll take it down a little bit more deeply, but let's just stay up at that high level. How do we do that currently? Or how should we do that? Sorry.
Well, I think that's what it's all about here. Exactly. So what doesn't work is the posting part, right? I can post 7 times a day on LinkedIn. It doesn't mean anybody's going to buy from me. But if I go look at 7 prospects and see if there's any trigger events, like have they changed jobs? Have they posted about needing my service? Do they have a new competitor? Was there some change in the industry? All the kind of stuff that I can see what they're talking about and then relate that to an opportunity. All those are, I call them trigger events, are reasons for us to reach out and have a conversation. So now I see that I'm friends with you on LinkedIn, and you just added a sales manager as a new connection that I want to meet. I can call you up and say, hey, Brian, how well do you know Sarah over there at XYZ company? I saw you just connected with her. Is this somebody new, or have you known her for a long time? And do you think she'd be a good client for me?
Yeah.
And now I'm transitioning that listening immediately into actionable steps that I can take to start sales conversations.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point on that particular one. So for me to be able to reach out to a Mike Montague and say, hey, listen, I see so-and-so, you really have to be engaged. So there's a lot of relationship building, relationship focus that we have to do there. So you were one of the most disciplined people that I know. I mean, from the fact of, the time you wake up to, I don't drink alcohol, to I'm doing all these different things, right? So you have a lot of discipline to it. So it's not like you're just floating around on there. So I'm going to take a quick pivot, and then I'll come back to that question again. Is, from a time execution standpoint, how are you leveraging that? Because it's really easy to get lost in the melees of, oh my gosh, there's so many postings, so many ways that I can go down these rabbit holes.
Well, I think we could go, several different ways on that too. The first one is probably attitude. If you don't have a plan going in and you don't know what you're looking for, you're going on a scavenger hunt without the list. So you're going to waste a lot of time going down rabbit holes that don't pay off. If you know who your ideal client is, if you know what it sounds like when, somebody hits one of these trigger events, if you know, you've already have a saved list of prospects that you want to go after, then it's just a matter of blocking out your time for that. So I don't block a ton of time, but I would say most salespeople should have prospecting blocks on their calendar. So maybe it's just an hour a day in the morning that I go on and I do my pre-call research and then I make the dials. Great, go do that for an hour and just work your way down the list. The other thing would be, morning, noon, and night are good times if you wanted to do quick 20-minute check-ins. That's when most people are on social media. And so a lot of good tips there, but I don't think it's a ton of wasted scattered time. I think you're right. I'm very particular about how I spend my time, and social media can definitely be a time suck if you don't know what you're using it for. But just schedule it out. How many calls do I need to make? If you know your cookbook and your activity schedule, how many appointments do I need? If I need 2 appointments a day, I probably need to make, 20 to maybe 36 calls in order to set those 2 appointments. So how do I get a list saved where I can go through and make my 36 dials?
Yeah, no, so let's talk through a couple of different segments, because a salesperson is not a salesperson. It's not a salesperson right now, especially depending, are you in manufacturing, technology? There's all of these different segments. So should I be breaking these down, Mike, differently depending on my role or my focus? If I'm top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, customer success, and does that change at all? Should it matter?
I don't think the techniques change. I think you still want to listen, ask for referrals, look for opportunities, information, and people. But obviously, the information that you're looking for, the people that you're looking for, differ from industry. The only one that maybe is a little bit different is business to consumer. So in the B2C market, they're not going to have necessarily a formalized decision structure where if I'm selling into an enterprise account, I might know, okay, these are all the VPs or this is everybody in this department that I need to reach out and strategize how to get in front of. Sometimes I think that's a little bit easier. Consumers do still have their own decision matrix, but they're not as easy to find. So you might have to use social media to say, what's their immediate family look like? Who are their friends? Do they already know somebody in my industry that they're probably going to work with if they don't pick me? There's still ways to look and do that, but it does change a little bit.
Yeah. So and so what you're saying, because most of the people that are listening to this are all that B2B usually. So
Good.
On the B2B side, even as an SDR, that SDR, I still need to listen, or even SDR, BDR, whatever DR you want to call it. Still really need to make sure that I'm focused on that critical few. So nothing new under the sun here. It's just a matter of how do I best leverage this tool. So within that tool set, then, if I'm going to practice social listening, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything that I should do, like your perspective on personal branding? Seen a lot of people tying in social selling with bringing my own particular brand. Can you talk a little bit about that? Any suggestions there?
I'm definitely in the minority on that one. I would say it does help to build your own authority and your own relationships and network. So by adding value to your network, those are some of the things that you can use to trade for those people, information, and opportunities.
Mm.
So if I have my own relationships, I have my own knowledge, I have my own network and resources and branding platform, I can leverage those and trade those for the people, information, and opportunities. And the reason I love it so much, this is a little bit complicated to do in this format, but if you take the online course, it's spelled out nicely. Those are basically unlimited resources that you're using. So if you're doing social media marketing and you're paying for an advertisement on Facebook and you're promoting a post, you're trading dollars for your buyer's attention. If you're sharing your knowledge on social media, you get to keep that knowledge. It's still there. And oftentimes it gets strengthened because you've clarified your thoughts and you've presented it. And so you learned more to do that post or video or something. So when I'm using these infinite resources like our knowledge, our network, even our personal brand and intimacy about who I am and what I'm doing. You've mentioned a couple already that you've seen about my workout habits and my clean living and all my life optimization stuff. That doesn't really have anything to do with sales or social selling, but those are personal, intimate things that I can share that just build my network. There's no way that doesn't go away. It's an unlimited, untapped resource that we can use. Now, last thing I would say is what doesn't help necessarily is trying to position myself as the worldwide guru of whatever industry I'm in if I'm not really that person.
Yeah.
There are some people that need to be the authority, maybe the face of the organization, which is great. But a lot of times, what's on your profile or what you're doing there, how professional the assets are, is a marketing exercise and not really a sales one.
Okay, so with that, that's a beautiful transition, Mike. Let's go back then to that social selling or I like your language, I'm going to keep it using it, is that social listening. So
Yeah.
what are some different ways that I can become pretty effective on my social listening? So we named out the one, we're going to time block out when we're going to execute on it. And two, if you don't mind, because a lot of people might not be overly familiar with the terminology cookbook, let's define cookbook, and then we'll go into maybe some cookbooks and tactics to there if we might.
Sure. So a cookbook is a really simple metaphor we use here at Sandler around creating your recipe for success. That's why it's called a cookbook. If you think about what a recipe is, it has the list of ingredients that you're going to need in order to be successful. It has the steps of the action items you're going to need to take. And most importantly, the amount of energy and time you're going to have to put into this recipe in order to get a successful result. Now, makes sense in baking that you would have all the ingredients ahead of time, have enough time, know how much heat and energy you're going to put into it, and make sure you do the things in the right order in order to get a nice cake. In sales, a lot of salespeople have not taken the time to do that same thing. What are the resources you need in a week in order to have a successful week? What are the action items and steps you need to take every single day in what order in order for you to have a successful result of a sale? How much effort, time, energy does it take to take an opportunity from a stranger to an ideal client, a raving fan? So all of these things could be different for everybody under the sun, but I think you need to define what it is. How much do we need in sales? How many sales do we need is a different answer for everybody. Depends on what you want to make. Also, it depends on what you're selling and what your profit margins and commissions are. You know, somebody might need 1,000 sales this week. Other people might need one good sale in a year.
This quarter,
even.
yeah, right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so, and
So that's a little mix there.
Yeah, so, and to that point, I think one thing that Mike points out here is baking, that cookbook, that recipe in baking is different than cooking, where I'm just throwing in ingredients, right? So, hey, it might taste good, it might be a disaster, but whenever you're baking, if you're not following the order and doing all those little minor things, it can really throw things off. So I never put it in that context before, Mike. So that's a really good point. So in that cookbook, any sense, so we have to do all of these different things, and you threw out the, hey, listen, if I need two new meetings, I might need 30 to 40 conversations, or 30 to 40 conversations or attempts. Well, it depends, right? Because depending on what approach, what strategy that I'm taking is really going to determine what my activity level is. Because if I'm net new cold, I'm hitting 2.5 to 3.5, maybe if I'm lucky, 4% of the outreach to people picking up. That's going to be a much higher level than if I'm leveraging these social channels and it's 3 people and I'm having one conversation, which is a warm introduction, and I'm getting a 70% likelihood of a connected meeting. So can you give me any sense of what's an ideal mix? I mean, whenever we're throwing social listening into this, social selling into this, what's any sense what my ideal mix should be within my cookbook?
Yeah, I generally kind of think 50% is a nice ratio all the way through your funnel.
Okay.
So if it's too high, let's say let's say 90% of the people you call set an appointment with you. That's too high. It sounds great, right? But the problem is you're probably not calling enough people because you're not getting enough no's at that point. If only 10% of the people you call set a meeting, that's too low, and you're not qualifying your list well enough. You're calling a lot of people that are not buying from you. So I kind of see 50 as the ideal range. Depending on what stage of the funnel you are and where your bottleneck is, I think everybody should have one of their steps in this funnel that is your kind of go, no go, where you really cinch it down and it's right before you go to all the work. So for me personally, if it's a stranger, I'll talk to as many strangers that want to call me or want to have a conversation, because I never know which next call is going to be that $1 million deal or something amazing, right? Don't know enough about them. But if you want me to spend 10 hours doing quotes and proposals and looking at prices, I'm going to make sure that you're going to buy before I go to all that work. So somewhere between starting the conversation and doing a lot of work on an account, we want to qualify and get our list down to just the people who are likely to continue through the sales process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let me break that down a little bit. So what really Mike is talking about here is pipeline management, right? So you have top of the funnel, bringing in that social selling, social listening to get those opportunities. But my gosh, you better make sure that as you're coming through those opportunities, that it goes from disqualification to disqualification as quickly as possible. That way, if they're not worth your time, the old language, if it's a no, if it's an NO, I want a KNOW as quickly as possible. So now, is it 50% through that whole entire process, Mike, or are you talking 50% at the top of the funnel?
That's a great question. So I think you want to average 50% all the way through. And this is just a number that I made up. It's not even, I don't think, an official Sandler stat. But when we look at stuff nationwide, what we see is about, half of the people that you call will pick up the phone. Half of them that you talk to will set an appointment. Half of those that set an appointment will set a second appointment. And then half of those that you do a proposal for will buy. So if we look at that, we probably need somewhere around like 16 times the number of sales that we need at the top of our funnel. Now, inside of those, like I said, they might vary. So maybe if I have a really great product or it's something new that everybody, or I'm influential, everybody takes my call, right?
Right.
Well, that individual one might be 80, but that means we probably need to go a little bit lower and disqualify a bunch of those people if everybody's taking my call. So kind of in my head, I think, am I winning more than I'm losing? Is this a good thing for my sales funnel? And I try to kind of average that out based on where I'm qualifying. But at some point, I want to make sure that I have plenty coming in to fill and make sure enough come out the other side.
Yeah. So I think it's back on episode 3. If Ryan Reiser talks about the math of sales, and that's really what Mike is talking about here, which ties into your cookbook. If you don't know your math of sales, it's a really critical element to know, because if you're more commoditized, meaning that it's really difficult to differentiate, you're likely going to find only 7% of the people that you're talking to are going to convert to a first-time meeting. It's really difficult to differentiate yourself. And on the other end that Mike's talking about, you have that unicorn that everybody wants. It might be a lot easier to get that meeting, but a lot more difficult to drive that to close because it sounds so good, but then they can't afford it. So it's really knowing those differences in between there. So all right, now let's go to some tactical parts off of this then, Mike.
Yeah.
We're social listening. So let me just make sure I have this process right. So I've identified my ideal customer profile. And then within that ideal customer profile, I've identified maybe a couple of 2, 3, 5, however many stakeholders are in your sales process. So if I have a nice, simple, 1 to 3 call close, I probably only have 2, 3 stakeholders there. If I have more of that enterprise side, I might be 5 to 8 stakeholders in there. So I've identified my ideal customer profiles, and I've identified the personas within each one of those profiles. And then hopefully, not only have I done that, but then I've also broken down to the why would it matter? Why would these people be interested? What are the pain, frustrations, griefs that they're facing? What are the strategic objectives they're trying to achieve that I and my group can bring to the marketplace to make their life easier? So that, to make sure I got this right, Mike, that's all the pre-work before I even listen the first time on social. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think there's some other things that we could look at too. I always love to talk about those trigger events and things of what happens before somebody buys your product or service is a really great thing to have on your list. But everything else you mentioned is certainly on my list. What are their job titles? What are their situations? If we know company names, if we know business sizes, anything that we can know ahead of time helps us narrow down our list as we punch this in. Now, a lot of people search for people on LinkedIn. You know that you could go on LinkedIn at the top in the search bar, type in somebody's name, and their profile will come up, right?
Right.
What a lot of people don't know is you can also search for content, for jobs, or for people based on this information, their title, their industry, their location. And so I can actually create my prospect list by, if I sell to VP of sales, type in VP of sales, hit the industry that you want to hit, and filter down into a nice manageable prospect list, and then start looking at how you know them. Now, I want to quickly go through some others, and then you can ask me which ones you think are interesting here, Brian. But you can do the same thing. I love jobs. I was working with Thermo Fisher Scientific last week on the same thing, and they said they sell to directors of research at educational or hospital institutions, right?
Right.
So I said, would you want to know if a hospital is hiring a new director of research? They're like, well, yeah, right. There's probably a good chance he's going to have some new projects, want some new equipment, need to fix old stuff, right? There's a lot of change when somebody hires. Great. You can go on LinkedIn and search for all the companies in your market hiring directors of research.
Yeah.
And then you got a nice prospect list there right in front of you. And that's the information and opportunities that I was talking about.
So let me,
The other thing,
if I might, let me go down
yeah,
on that and,
yeah,
write down what that other thing is so we don't lose that.
I get it. Yeah.
So is that a Boolean search? Do I need to spend the extra money on Sales Navigator to do that? Or how do I go about doing that?
All free filters. If you really want some advanced filters, they do charge for some. If you got Sales Navigator, you can do a little bit more. I'm not sure LinkedIn appreciates it when I say it this way, but I see Sales Navigator as gym equipment. That if you're already working out, a gym membership or gym equipment is a great investment, right? Because you're already doing it. If you're not working out, buying a treadmill or buying a gym membership is not going to help you lose weight.
Yeah, it's expensive
So,
clothes hanger.
right. So same thing on LinkedIn. If you're already using it and you're mastering all these social selling techniques we've been talking about today, and you want some advanced help in that, then Sales Navigator is awesome. If you're not using LinkedIn, you're never logging in, you're not doing any of these searches, having advanced search filters is not going to help you very much.
Yeah. So just so you're not, because I can just hear it, people, I got to spend extra money on this. I can't do that on my. So you
No.
can literally do that. And if you have a question for like probably less than $100, I can even get my social selling on Sandler shop.sandler, whatever that thing is. You'll throw it out
Yeah.
later, right? It's like less than $100. Freaking spend $100 for goodness sakes. So go and do that. So all right. So what was the second thing?
So the other thing there, I was going to say, most people miss. I don't know that without me telling them I've ever seen a salesperson bring this up, but you can search for content, what people post on LinkedIn. So again, going with my Thermo Fisher example, they're trying to sell mass spectrometry equipment. So I said, well, type that into the search on LinkedIn, and then there's a down arrow which says what type of search, and you can go to content, and you can see everybody on LinkedIn that you're connected to that has mentioned mass spectrometry equipment in the last whatever time frame, in the last 24 hours. And I said, well, would you want to know that? And that's what I was talking about with listening is if they're bragging about their new equipment, if they imagine how many people go online on Facebook or LinkedIn and say, I can't believe the mass spec machine is down again, blah, blah, blah. I hate this stupid thing.
Yeah.
Is that something you want to know as a mass spec salesperson? Right? To me,
I just
that's
bought
cool.
mine today. Yeah, I just bought mine today. Wish I would know that. Son of a gun. Yeah, it's right there. It's mass spectrometry and jobs and people in groups. That's incredible.
Right. And so that's the type of listening that I'm talking about. And now social media companies do this all the time. They're listening and paying attention to everything that everybody shares and what you like and what you post. But how many salespeople post something and even your prospect or customer says, I like that. They click like button and you just ignore it and walk away.
Right.
If
Yeah.
somebody in a live networking event said, hey, Brian, I like your shirt, and you just ignored him and walked off, how would that go? Right?
Right. Not doing
But
really
it
well.
happens every single day. People are liking, commenting, sharing stuff that you make. Just say, what did you like about it? And start a sales conversation from that.
Yeah, and that's one thing, and that's a piece that I learned from Mike's. Not to make this a commercial, so forgive me if it comes across this way, but it's these simple little tactics that make all the difference in the world, right? So it's making sure that you're reacting to these. I was talking with in an episode a while back that you can pay for these services that people will go out and post content and do the social marketing for you. But if you're not going to comment on, if you're not going to reply back, if you're not going to engage them, it's a vanity metric that you're not going to get return on investment on. So, yeah, really good stuff here. Okay, so we're now searching these, targeting these specific people on LinkedIn. leveraging our network. Now, in the old days, and I haven't done this for a while, so shame on me. So this forces me to do this. In the old days, you could actually do an advanced search within your connections. Um,
Right.
Something we're still doing these days, or
Yeah, still can, and that's my number one favorite tactic. So we're 30 minutes in. I shouldn't have waited that long to get it out there. But my favorite topic is to any meeting on your calendar. At Sandler, we call this following the yellow brick road. If you think about it, if you need 2 appointments a day, you fill your calendar for 2 weeks out doing whatever prospecting, cold, prospecting, whatever you have to do. But in every meeting, then you look up and say, I have this meeting with you, Brian. I go on your LinkedIn. I look for names of people that I would like to be introduced to that you already know. And now instead of saying, hey, Brian, you got any referrals for me? Which always ends up as no, because people hear that question as like, hey, who do you know that will pay me money? Right? It's like, well, I don't know anybody I want to sick a salesperson on, and I don't know anybody who wants to buy your stuff. I would have brought it up already.
yeah,
So instead of that, I say, hey, Brian, I went on your LinkedIn and I found these people that I thought might be good prospects for me, but I'm not sure. And this language is all really important here. But it's going negative and saying, Brian, I need your help, which is another great word. Can you cross out any names here that you think would not be good prospects for me? And if there's anybody left, can we talk about why you think I might need to have a conversation with them?
yeah,
And what that does is instead of making them come up with names or say, hey, who's here is most likely to buy from me, you just say for any reason. If they're a jerk, if they don't pay their bills, if you don't know them very well, if they don't buy what I'm selling, any reason, scratch them off. All you're doing is saving me time. I appreciate you help me narrow down my prospecting list. And I've never gone 0 for 10.
I see.
So typically they go, you know what? I never thought about Rachel over here, but she'd be a really good introduction for you. She was just talking about needing, what you have or something. And you go, great. How well do you know Rachel? Would you mind introducing me?
Yeah. Hey, you wouldn't make an introduction, would you?
Right. And you only need one of those, right? Following my calendar analogy, you only need one of those to set another appointment. And then you don't ever have to do prospecting again. This is the only prospecting that you're doing because every calendar meeting on your calendar results in another meeting and introduction if you do this the right way. And they could even be internal, right? It could be who else in your organization here on my list do I need to talk to?
Yeah, one of our clients is a bank, and they talk about internal business partners, and they're hey, we can't get enough people through the door. Nobody's going to our bank branches anymore. So how in the world can we do this? Well, yeah, you can take your internal business partners and do this exercise. So well said. All right, so now we've allocated time on our calendar. We're leveraging social media or we're leveraging this to do Boolean searches, or my goodness, you can put mass spectrometry into the search bar. Now I know everybody was looking for one, so it might be too niche or there might not be much niche for you, for goodness sakes. But yeah, you can't get much more niche than a mass spectrometer, I don't think. So we're doing things like that prior to the sales call that we're running or the center of influence call that we're going to hold. Then we go in there, we look through their connections to find out who they can introduce us to. And like you said, that's a flywheel effect. Now it's just going and going off of that. And we don't have to do as many cold calls. We don't have to do as many outreach. And it's really starting to then leverage our network. Now, that seems entirely too easy. It doesn't seem possible. Like, why aren't we doing that? Why am I an idiot and I'm making cold calls all the time?
I think there are a few reasons. The first one is it's just technology, and for some reason, we as human beings, we categorize information in different buckets, right? So when I meet somebody offline in the real world, I forget, oh, I can add that person on LinkedIn. And when I meet somebody on LinkedIn, I forget, oh, I can pick them up on the phone and call them too. I don't have to just follow their stuff for the next 10 years. I can pick up the phone and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Or go set a coffee and see them in person if that's allowed in your state at the moment. So I think we put these buckets in our head. And one of the things is a technology, especially with older professionals, I'm just going to say it. They say, "Oh, I'm going to break the internet," or "I'm not good with technology." It is honestly so easy that I've taught everybody in every age group how to do this. I think I'm up to 98 is the oldest person that I've taught to do these things. They wanted to add their great grandkids at college on LinkedIn. If I can show them how to do it,
Yeah.
you can do this, right? And you're not going to break the internet. So I think part of it is a little bit of fear, but also there's just that weird sales thing where, Brian, I know you know, but there's this myth that sales has to be hard and scary and that cold calls have to be tough. And there's all this head trash around being pushy and I have to interrupt people and I have to be a jerk. But when we look at the most successful salespeople on the planet, it doesn't look anything like our stereotypical belief of what sales is.
Yeah.
It actually is easy. And so, the last thing I'd say here, and I'll give you a chance to respond, is we have a great line at Sandler which says, selling stuff that people need, they have the money to pay for, and the decision making authority to decide on is not cheating. That's the way sales should be,
Yeah.
right? So,
That's
it
being the
should
sales
be that easy.
professional.
You're looking for people that need your stuff, that have the money to pay for it, and are ready to make a decision. Great. That's a
Okay.
lot easier.
Yeah. So let's go down to the land of reality then. So you know, I would say the majority of people out there aren't having that type of success, or they're not living in that world. Um, so let's break this into a couple of segments. Okay. So I have a lifestyle business. I can do this. That's one segment, right? I could hear people say, "Oh, this only works in a lifestyle business." How much scale can I get leveraging this type of methodology? I mean, um, book um, 5, 10, 15, 20 meetings per week, per month, per quarter? What can I expect out of this if I'm doing this consistently and effectively?
I don't think there is a limit. Now, what limits most people are if you're working for a company, your boss might be expecting a certain number of dials on the call report, or you might have limited territory and stuff, which might create a little bit more scarcity in your prospect pool. But for the most part, you exist as a salesperson because the companies believe that there's more business out there than they can get to, right? That's why
Yeah.
you have a job. So I would say it's unlimited. I've also seen people take these all the way up to meetings with very famous people. I met the author Seth Godin. That was my dream appointment.
Oh,
I
very
reached out
nice.
to him and said, "Hey, I saw you're going to be in the area. Can I meet you?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm doing a book signing at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. Swing by and I'll get you there." And I'll just go ahead and tell the story because I love it. So I show up, and the lady gatekeeper there's like, "Where's your ticket? These tickets to this book signing were pre-sold, months in advance. If you don't have a ticket, you're not getting in." And I just pulled out my phone and pulled up the message from Seth on social media, and I said, "Seth said I should stop by. Is that okay?" And they're
Yeah.
like, "Well, I suppose." Yeah, right? Like,
Come
if
on
you have a
in.
message from the man himself, then
Yeah.
great. And I've seen that work for presidents of companies everywhere else too, is that a lot of times people use their own social media account. So I interviewed the drummer for Pink just because I sent him a message on Twitter and said, "Hey, I saw you have a new book coming out. Would you like to be on my podcast?" And wrote back, "Yeah, sure." He
Yeah.
checks out social media and everything, right?
Yeah.
I
And
don't think there's a limit.
yeah, there, and it never hurts to ask. What's the worst that they're going to say? No. And so they
Yeah.
might say no this first time, but so what? Then you come back at them again, and then you can leverage things like this. I've seen this before. Is you put it out there. Hey, I'm looking to have a meeting with Daniel Pink to from talk about to sell as human. You wouldn't know him and be able to make an introduction for me, would you? And people start to
Right.
work their networks for you. Yeah, I enjoyed your podcast. I'll reach out to Daniel. Let's see if we can get him on the podcast for you. So yeah, it's doing things along those lines. And then, oh, I don't know. Let's go back to Mike's other trick is, or not trick, but a strategy of looking in within my network, who am I separated with? And three degrees of separation, 2 degrees of separation. So and so can introduce you to so and so, and you're in. So, I mean, it's not rocket science, but here's the thought, though: it takes some strategy, and you have to have some delayed gratification. So just thinking through this aloud, I hadn't thought about this before, but
Yeah.
oftentimes we as salespeople are looking every 2 weeks, or my goodness, you're looking every week. What did I do this week? What did I do this last month? What am I doing this quarter? And so we're looking to short-term tactically, and maybe this is more a strategic long-term play. Is that a accurate summary?
I think so. I mean, I think for most people, you have a big enough network to make this work, and most people are way off on the numbers. So, for marketing purposes, LinkedIn shows that people that have more than 5,000 connections will be more likely to hit their quota. However, that's marketing wise. Sales wise, 250 to 500 degree connections are actually more likely to make quota as salespeople than as marketers.
Interesting.
So there's a vast difference. So if you're trying to build an audience and sell to a whole bunch of people, you need at least 5,000 connections.
Okay.
However, if you're looking to make friends and get introductions through your connections, like we've been talking about, it's actually better to have fewer. After 500, you can't keep up 500 personal relationships. So you start losing people out the back end for everybody new that you bring in. So it's much better in sales to have a few strong relationships with a diverse group of people than it is to have a massive audience. So I think you can start pretty quickly, but yes, these are long-term things. Simon Sinek has a new book coming out called Infinite Games, and social media, in my mind, is an infinite game. We're not playing to win social media. We're not playing to win a sale. We're playing to keep these relationships infinitely and keep the conversations going as long as possible. That's a different mindset.
Yeah. So in that long-term strategic mindset, you're going to have to really strategically think about how can I make relationships, and especially whenever relationships at this point are maybe a little bit more challenging, because we can't just go around and say, hey, let's grab a coffee, let's jump on an airplane and go visit people. I mean, you have to be a little bit more specific, I would think, and all of that. So all right, so now we've done that. We've reached out. We only need 250 to 500 people, which, my goodness, if you're in sales, I don't know how you don't have that. So get to that 500. So it shows 500 plus, for goodness sakes.
Right.
What other, as we wind this down, Mike, what are maybe some last one or two tactics that we should be really leveraging in LinkedIn? Do you want to talk about, how many posts we should be doing? Should we be doing any at all? Should it be our content that we're creating? Should we, what do they call that? Help me with the word
Curate.
here. Curate. Thank you. Should we curate others? I mean, talk us through a little bit on that, please.
My personal strategy is a little bit of all of the above.
Okay.
So I do love curation because most people just don't have the time to be a content creator that often and as often as necessary. So I try to leverage the company and industry content as much as possible. If you're following industry groups, if you're following your company's post and you have a marketing department and stuff, they're generally cranking out enough stuff to keep you busy. But I would recommend, say, maybe once a week to once a month, doing something that you're creating yourself. So whether that's a podcast, a blog post, a quick video, any type of graphic or interesting social media post to start a conversation. Questions and polls are really good for interaction. If you're trying to do that every day, I've found it to be overwhelming. But if you try and do that once a week to once a month, you can usually come up with something that you want to talk about just based on what's exciting and interesting in your world.
Yeah, and that's a good point. If you're interested in it, you can crank it out pretty darn quickly, and it's no big deal there. Got it. Well, hey, look. Oh my gosh, Mike, you're looking at the clock. Things go by so fast whenever you're enjoying the conversation. So thanks for this. So let me kind of wind this down here a little bit. I mean, you shared a ton, So let's talk about maybe a challenge that you run into, maybe a hard lesson learned in terms of this social selling. So where you stoved your toe and that hurts. How can we not have that same bad experience?
I think when it comes to bad experiences, the one that I always talk about is just dealing with trolls. I think sometimes that does keep people off of social media. And if there are any haters out there that don't like your stuff, the best way to deal with them is just completely ignore it. So sometimes we feel we want to respond and defend our position and justify what we were doing. That really is just feeding negativity and reinforcing people that want to say bad things. I found it to be very, very rare. I've been doing this publicly on a lot of stuff for a long time, like 10 years now. I've only had one occasion where somebody specifically went out to bash the advice that I was giving.
Okay.
It was a marketing type person who didn't like, what we were talking about with social media marketing. And I didn't realize that the person that I was friends with was also friends with that person. So when I commented on my friend's post saying that guy was full of it, he saw that post.
Oh, no. Okay.
And then I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that publicly. That was bad. So if I had taken my own advice and just kind of kept my mouth shut or reached out to him privately and said, hey, man, why would you share something where the guy's bashing me in his blog? Like,
right.
What the heck? We're friends, right? That would have handled a lot better. But other than that, I would say generally, even companies get worried about bad reviews and things. They're few and far between, and the best way to combat negative comments or bad reviews is to have way more overwhelmingly positive reviews. So if you get a bad review, go out there and get 10 more good ones. And that just breeds more authenticity into what people are seeing. And they go, oh, well, somebody didn't like it. It wasn't for them, but these other 10 did. So he must be a good guy, or they must have a good product.
Yeah, and the reality of it is there's no way that you're pleasing everyone, especially in today's day and age. So yeah, that's good advice. So don't worry about it, right? And if you don't have any detractors, you're probably not being as provocative or cutting edge as maybe you ought to be. So
exactly.
Thought. Now, how about a business hack? Whether it's for building up talent, whether it's for increasing sales, or how do I scale the business? One thing that you think that we as an audience should know?
Just in general, but also related to this topic, I would say less is more. We seem to be a society that thinks more is better, and that's not the case. So even when it goes with prospects or your social media posts or the hiring, what I've found is if you get good quality, content, people, prospects, they will far outweigh the results of a quantity mentality, but also it just makes it so much more fun, right? Would you rather work 10 bad prospects or one really good one that wants to buy and is excited to work with you? Well, hands down, I'd rather take one good prospect all day.
Yeah.
So many people miss that.
Mike, I was going to say, I hate that piece of advice because I screw it up all the time, right? So yeah, keeping it stupidly simple, less is more. Oh my gosh, yes. So thanks for that. Appreciate it. I hate you right now. Anyway, all right, let's go. Resources that you recommend. You laid out a couple of different books, podcasts, guides. I mean, some resources that we should be taking advantage of, Mike.
Sure. I wouldn't be a sales trainer if I didn't mention ours first. So, of course.
What's that one?
Sandler.com/LinkedIn Secrets. You can download the PDF version of my book for free. We also have an online course, which is $97. So you just go to shop.sandler.com and click on online courses or search for Social Selling Success by Sandler Training. You'll find that course there. There's lots of good free podcasts. I host the How to Succeed podcast. We don't talk a ton about social selling, but we do talk a lot about sales and management and sales leadership. So great stuff there. Now, other people's stuff, I think certainly Seth Godin for any type of marketing professional development stuff is great. There are some good social media marketing books. I'm having trouble coming up with one off the top of my head right now. Maybe the New Rules of Marketing and PR. It's old, so they're kind of old rules, but it's a great book, Timeless Principles. and good stuff. Then a new one I'm reading right now, which if you're an uber nerd, I don't know what your audience is here, Brian,
Yeah.
but it's called Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal.
Okay.
And it's a book about how you use gamification to increase your own performance or the actions other people take.
Love that.
And it's blowing up right now. The Social Dilemma on Netflix is an amazing watch. If you haven't seen that, that's how social media leverages gamification to create that addictive mindset of people coming back over and over again. But really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, that's my next play is how do we bring gamification into the sales piece? Did Sandler come up with that yet, or is there any product market that Sandler has out there for gamification yet?
Not necessarily. No,
Okay.
we have some behavioral tracking apps and some things that will help you create sales leaderboards and help you mark off those cookbook behaviors and stuff. We have an app called Sales Accountability, salesaccountability.com.
Okay.
Uh, but and it is built around that gamification. So you collect points for each one, and you can compete against teams and have leaderboards and stuff. But I haven't seen anything that's quite as addictive as social media and
Yeah.
stuff in that regard, though.
Got it. No, I love it. So now that transitions to this. Let's get out your magic eight ball and say, hey, what are the trends that are coming down in the future? What do we need to pay attention to? Um, what trends?
Beautiful. Well, they all came true this year.
Yeah, right.
So I've been asked that question for the last, 5 to 7 years, and I keep saying eventually social selling just becomes selling. And surprise, about March 15th this year, that's what happened.
Ta-da.
Right? So sales going forward, I don't think is going to reverse and you'll be like, oh, thank God we can stop virtually selling now and we can all go back to what we were doing before. I think we all know that this is the new reality. So we might be able to get back to appointments and some, face-to-face networking and stuff, which would be great. But I don't think people are going to be traveling like they did before. I think people have found the power and convenience of social media and virtual selling and Zoom calls that this will certainly be a part of the way we sell through history. And I think people will figure that out, just like they did with the phone and fax machines and email and everything else. We've just gotten to the point where now, from now on, this is something that needs to be part of your selling process. And I'll add one more thing, which is I think this was a couple of years ago where it happened, but I think from now on, certainly, it's rude if you don't look people up on social media before you call them. That
Interesting.
we've gotten to the point where there's enough information about us online that if somebody doesn't take 10 seconds to look at what we do and who we are before they call, they're short-sighted and they're disrespectful to our time, I feel like. So
Wow.
I would say every salesperson going forward, you have to do your research before you call.
So interesting. So let's couple that for my sales leaders who are saying, "Hey, we're leveraging this technology, and we're calling 150 people, 200 people an hour. We're not doing that." Well, make sure you have your double screens up, and as soon as you hear the bloop, and you're picking up the phone, you're clicking on the website, you're clicking on their LinkedIn, and you can speak to that pretty darn quickly. So there's a both and, or make sure that those come into
Right.
the follow up call. So yeah, it's a good takeaway, Mike. I appreciate that. All right, so you already did it because that was a foul or this an awesome job. So this was a lesson in conversational selling, everyone. So I hope you're picking that up. So who should reach out to you, Mike? How should they do it, and why should people reach you?
Well, for us, it is outside salespeople. Generally, they are not getting in front of enough people. They're not closing enough business they're getting in front of, or they are not closing at the margins that they want, and they're getting beat up on negotiating and price. All the stuff we've talked about today kind of wraps up into the three of those. But we talk to sales individuals and sales leaders all the way up to Fortune 500 companies at the corporate office where I work for and helping them solve those three things. So Sandler.com/sell is a really easy website to remember if you don't remember the rest of them.
Yeah, now shameless plug here because I love the one resource on it. I think it's called Sales Judo or Sandler Judo. That one, is that right? Which one is it?
Yeah, I think it Sales Judo
Maybe Sales Judo. So
with
that's on.
Tom Neeson.
Yeah, it's with
Yeah,
Tom Neeson. So that's on the Sell platform. So SELL. That's a free resource, if I'm not mistaken, right?
that's right. Yeah, you get a year free.
Yeah, so it's worth it just for that one. Sales Judo by Tom Neeson. Get the sell piece. Phenomenally good stuff. Well, Mike, I knew this would be a good time. I can't thank you enough for the tactics and strategies here. As always, I really appreciate all that you're doing, and thanks for being a good example out there. So, on behalf of Mike Montague from Sandler Training, this is Brian Whittington with the Talent, Sales, and Scale Show signing off. See you next time. Thanks. Get after it.